to this PhD session, which is going to be actually our second session having to do with change management. So the first one that we did on March 22nd was the process of change. We're going to review that, and then what we're going to be dealing with today is actually using some instruments or some techniques for you to manage the change. And hopefully, what's going to come out of this is not only that you're going to feel more confident when you are placed in a position where you have to manage change, but that some of these things can actually, some of the instruments we're going to be looking at can be used in other situations that are not related to change necessarily. So they're multi-purpose kinds of instruments, which I think professionally, from an HR point of view, will definitely give you more techniques to use. So, this is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about the change process. We're going to look at change management as a cycle. Then we're going to look at some change management tools. These are not the only tools, but I believe that for the time being, they are probably the most important ones. So they will be the ones that will help you in different parts of the change management process. So we're going to be dealing with what we call the fishbone diagram. It's also called cause and effect diagram. We're going to look at the 5 whys, which is a technique on how to find the root cause of a problem. And then we're going to look at force field analysis, which is how you determine what kind of forces you're working with. If the forces are going to help you, or if the forces are going to give you problems, so that we can adjust them, so that we can have a better chance of getting the right things. Okay. Do any of you remember what happened when we looked at this last time as a process? Were all of you here for the second part? You were here, were you here? Yes. Okay, so if you look at the process of change, you're going to look at the fact, or consider the fact, that whenever we're talking about where we are now, we call it status quo. Status quo means the way it is now. We have to have an understanding of what the status quo is. In other words, what are we able to do now? What are our problems now? What kind of productivity do we have? What kind of internal situations are we dealing with? So that this part, the status quo, is always very important. And how do we know this, by the way? How are we going to know what the situation is now?
Maybe using SWOT analysis?
Using a SWOT analysis, using data. You would have to get data that would confirm where we are, right? Inputs, yes. So that we don't just say, I think we're here. Because if we say, I think we're here, and then we're using I think to build an argument for where we're going to go, it's an assumption. And assumptions are very dangerous, right? Because assumptions means I'm not sure, I think, but I can't build on assumptions. I have to make sure that I understand the data, and I've collected enough data. So if we are here today, then the future state, or the desired state, where we want to go, or we could even call it the vision, right?
Yeah.
So if we say that this is the vision, then what is this?
The best.
What would we call this part?
Present.
The present. Or we could actually call it the mission. Mission means, what do we do? What are we doing? Our mission
in the transition state, right? This is the mission.
Mission is the reason the company exists. So my mission right now, this is what I do in the market. But the desired state is the vision of the future. What would I like to be able to do?
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So actually, mission is operations. Mission is what I actually am able to do now. Why the company exists. The vision, I'm taking it from a larger sense than the strict sense of just the mission is, what's on the website. The website says we are a company that provides blah, 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 right? So mission is operationally what do we do. Vision is what would we like to be able to do 3 to 5 years from now. So we want to go from here to here, correct? So now, where you are today, where you want to be. What takes us, the process of change, is what takes us from here to here. So change is not an event. It's not a program that you have in a company. It's not a project that you have in a company. It is a process for taking you from where you are to where you want to be. And of course, there's a time element, right? To take us from where we are to this. So let me ask you this question. The longer it takes to go from here to here, the more what do we have? Problems. Right? Because we're going from something we know to something we don't know. So we're going to have this transition state. The longer we are in a transition state, the more resistance to the change you will have. So what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to move as quickly as possible, but carefully planned from the state where we are to where we actually want to be. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Because it's really important that we understand the process of change. Now, if we look at it from any point of view, good morning. Any point of view, whenever we're moving from one thing to another thing, it doesn't have to be inside of a company. It's like saying, I have my mission right now, let's say, is to do the best that I can in terms of the job that I have. But my vision in 3 to 5 years, let's say that I'm an HR generalist now, but my vision in 3 to 5 years is to become an assistant manager or a manager. How am I going to do that? How do I go from being an HR generalist, let's say, an HR assistant, to being manager 3 to 5 years from now? So that's the process, right? It's a process of change. So change management you can use for anything. Anything in your life, actually, where you want to go from somewhere, where you are now, to where you want to be 3 to 5 years from now. Of course, if we're moving a company from A to B, then definitely you really need a very planned process. How many of you have been involved in a change inside of a company that has gone well? I mean, like a major change. Okay? How many of you have been involved in a change in a company that has not gone well? Okay. Or sometimes companies actually have no change, or sometimes they have a lot of change, but what's important is, does the change at the end, does the change actually bring what the company was hoping it was going to bring? And in general, 70% of change initiatives are not successful. Well, that's a large number, 70%, which means that they are not doing it maybe the way that it needs to be done. Change is not being managed the way it's supposed to be managed. From the last session, we talked about good planning, definitely. From the last session, we said that when you plan for change, you need to plan for it like it is a project, right? So we take change from A to B, and we say, here's the project of change. We call it whatever. The problem is, we are very good, companies are very good usually at planning as if it's a project. They're good because they have, a lot of people have had training in project management. The problem is that they forget the people part of the change. The people, meaning I can have the change, I can change the software program, I can go from having a head office in one place to another place. But how do I bring people on board? They don't think of it most of the time. They just think that if I can get the move made, the physical move, everything is going to be okay, but it's not okay. So the people part is what we call change management. The technical part, we call that project management. In other words, I'm going to move from my office in Maadi to a new headquarters in Tagama. The whole move is a project. Usually we don't have a problem with that. The problem is the people who are going to go on that move. When you get them in Tagama, what can happen? They might hate the place. They might be against the change. And if you have not helped to manage the change, then you will fail because their productivity might actually decrease as a result of the change. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, we need to remember that the technical part of change, we call it project management. The people side of change, we call it change management process. Okay? So this is a review of what we talked about during the last session so that everybody is understanding the fact that it's a process. We also, during the last session, we talked about the organizational change process. This is called the Kirk-Lewin model, and it has three major parts to the model. The first part is about unfreezing. And I use the example that if you have ice cubes in your freezer, and you want to make something out of those ice cubes, let's say you want to make a dessert of some kind. Normally what you would have to do is unfreeze the ice cubes, because if you try to change the shape of the ice cubes, what's going to happen? By force. It's going to break. And then I'm not going to be able to really use it very effectively, right? So what I need to do is I need to unfreeze, and then I need to wait for it to become liquid, and after I refreeze it in the new shape that I want it to be. Well, this is exactly what happens inside of an organization. So inside we want to unfreeze, meaning, let's say that you've been using, let's use the example of a software program. Let's say that everybody in your department has been using a software program for a number of years, let's say 10 years, and people are very comfortable with it. Okay, it's not perfect, but they've learned how to use it, they're comfortable with it. Now all of a sudden, there's a new software program that's coming in. People don't know it. If I push it through anyway, without giving anybody a chance to understand, what's going to happen is you're going to get a lot of resistance, definitely, right? People are going to be upset. Why do we have to have a new software? It's perfectly fine. You will have things like the management is always changing things, they don't know what they're doing, and etc., etc. So, we go from unfreezing and also endings. Endings means here, celebrate the old, meaning that a good example that I try to use is about AUC. The AUC campus, when it was in Tahrir Square. Okay, it was not perfect, but people were very emotionally attached to the campus. It was a green space, it was downtown, a lot of historical things had happened there. And all of a sudden, you're moving them into this faraway place in the desert, in the middle of nowhere. So when we talk about endings, it means we have to celebrate all of the good stuff that came from that, what happened in the past. Whether it's the software program, whether it's the building itself, like the AUC campus, it is about making sure that people don't feel, we spent 10 years, does that mean we wasted 10 years of our time using the software program? No. You talk about how good it was, but now we need more. Things have changed. This is why. Okay? So you're understanding that we have to unfreeze, we have to end, we have to celebrate. And then you have to give people, like the ice, it's going to melt. So when it becomes liquid, it's going to be very movable. It's neutral. We go from ice to water to basically to refreezing into something different, and we start again a new beginning. So that's the concept. So the tools that we're going to be talking about today is how do we do this? How do those tools fit? What are we using the tools for? So there are three tools that we're going to be looking at. We have a tool that is about cause and effect. That means how do we find out what a problem is? And even how to present the problem to someone. The other tool is to find out the real cause of the problem. And then the third tool is going to be how do we manage resistance to a project, to a change initiative. How do we manage? How do we know what the resistance is like? And how do we know who's in agreement and who's in disagreement, and then how do we manage those forces. Are you okay at this point? Okay, so what we're going to do with the techniques we're going to learn about today is that we're going to help unfreeze. That means melting away the resistance. We're going to look at how do we do that. We're going to look at how we go from status quo, we said was the current state, to the desired state. And then we're going to look at how to make change routine. But today, we're not really going to be dealing with how to make it routine. Today, we're only going to be dealing with these two. How to help unfreeze and how to help change. So here we're going to be talking about resistance, and here we're going to talk about how do we actually move people from this to this, from the old to the new. Okay, so here are the tools that we are going to be dealing with today. We have the fishbowl. I said another way of calling it is cause and effect. We have the 5 whys. We're going to learn how to use that. We have the force field analysis. So those are the 3 tools. But you see it says tools need to be used with change principles. That means if you use these tools and you don't keep in mind some of the important things about change, you might learn how to use the tool very well, but you might not get the results you want. So very quickly, I'm just going to go over what the principles are that you have to keep in mind, and then we'll actually use the tools. So, address the human side systematically. That means that when you are going to do some kind of change, think about the people. If you were in their place, you must have a plan for moving people. That's 1. 2, start at the top, meaning the change needs to come from the CEO, and it has to cascade down. Involve every layer. I did some training on change management for a bank, a merger, and they only trained the branch managers. So what happened? The senior managers were not trained, the other employees were not trained. I just trained basically 1 layer. Of course, the results were not good. Yeah, they did not do it. It didn't turn out very well, that merger. Make the formal case. This means that you have to have the data to show people why do we have to move? Why are we making this change? Otherwise people say, they just decided like this. One day they woke up and decided to make a change. You have to give them the hard facts. Business case means what is going to change as a result of this that we're doing. Does it mean we're going to get more money? Does it mean we're going to get more customers? Does it mean we'll have fewer complaints? What does it mean? So you have to really know. Create ownership. Everybody needs to get on board with the change.
Engagement.
Engagement, exactly. So we need to have everybody engaged in the change. Communicate the message, meaning keep telling them this is what we're doing. Well, this is why we're doing it. You keep communicating on a regular basis. Assess the cultural landscape. Here we're talking about the landscape culture of the company. So, what kind of company? What kind of culture do we have inside of the company? Address the culture explicitly. That means that we're talking now about if we have problems with culture, we need to find solutions to problems. Can you give me an example of some kind of culture that could cause problems when we're dealing with change? What kind of culture could exist inside of a company that could give problems when we're talking about trying to change or trying to create a successful change initiative?
If there's no team building?
If there's no team building or there's no sense of teamwork, everybody's defending personal interests.
Old mindset of people.
Or a very old traditional mindset of people where change is not welcome. So those are cultural things that can actually create even more resistance. Prepare for the unexpected, because no matter how much planning you do, you're going to have to know that there are going to be things that are going to happen that you have not planned for, and speak to the individual. Meaning, do not talk to people like they are just groups of people. If people have concerns, managers need to be trained on how to talk to people as individuals, because that's going to make the connection. that we need so that so that ownership is created and so that it's their change as well. So this is what we need to keep in mind as we're using the tools that we're going to be using today. All right, so when do we use these three tools? Well, we can use them, and what they help us do is see things as interrelated. In other words, we're not just looking at part of a problem, we're looking at all of the problem. We're trying to understand the whole problem. Also, it shows, we're going to look at the relationship between cause and symptom, or cause and effect. It's not the same thing. And we have to understand the difference. Total problem, instead of focusing on part, we also want to reduce the scope of the problem so that we understand, we make it so that it fits into an idea that we can actually work with. Otherwise it becomes so huge that you don't know where to begin. And then basically we're going to look at how to reduce resistance. In any kind of change management, you're going to have resistance. Okay, so now we're going to start with what we call the fishbone diagram, which is the first one. And you can see already why it's called fishbone, right? Because it's sort of like the diagram of a fish. You have a head, we have basically the skeleton, and then we have all the bones that come out from the side. So we're going to look at how those bones, what we would be looking at when we look at a fishbone diagram. So we have here the head of the fish. That's where we're going to put the problem. The situation that you have will be in the head of the fish. This bone means that anything connected to that is going to be basically a cause, or we think it's a cause. Something that will cause a problem. It could be people. The problem could be caused by people. The problem could be caused by IT, by technology, or by finance, or by the location where you are, the physical location, or transportation, or clients. So, by the way, these four, or how many we have, 6 big bones, it doesn't mean that you have to do the fishbone diagram always with these. You can change them. But this is a very standard way, because usually with problems, people are involved with problems. Location usually is involved with problems. If it's a client problem, then you want to look at the effect of the client on the problem. Transportation could be a problem. So these are main characteristics. Does that make sense to you that we would, because I'm going to show you a real example, that we would put in where the example is in the head, we would write the problem, and then basically we're going to look at the causes. Let me ask you this question. What's the difference between a cause and an effect, or a cause and a symptom? Timing? In what way? Let me put it in a different way. If you go to the doctor, and the doctor says to you, "Why are you here?" And you say, "Well, I'm here because I have a fever. I have a fever." That's
fever
it.
is a symptom.
Okay, fever is a symptom.
But maybe I have an infection. Infection is a cause.
Okay, could
Of
be.
the fever.
Could be.
Okay.
Right. So a symptom is what
The
is
result.
what is observable, what I can see. The cause is
The
what is the reason for it. In other words, so if I say to him, I can't sleep, and he says, "Really? Tell me how you feel." "Well, I go to bed, and then I'm tossing and turning, and then I get up, and then when I go back to bed again, I find that I start to sleep for a while, and then I wake up again." And so those are all symptoms, right? Symptoms means, how do I know that you can't sleep? Well, this is what happens. Why is it important to understand the cause of something? What happens if he gives you medication because you can't sleep? And as long as you keep taking the medication, you fall asleep. And when you stop taking the medication, you still can't sleep. He has been treating what? The doctor has been treating what? Just the symptoms, not the cause. Right? If he gives me a medication and the medication makes me go to sleep, but the reason I can't go to sleep is because I have a problem at home. He's not fixing the problem at home. The fact that I'm taking the medication is not affecting the cause at all. All it's doing is helping me to live with the symptoms. So this, we have to make sure that we are dealing with cause. Otherwise, we could be trying to solve the wrong thing. Okay, so let's look at how we would do that. So in this case, the head of the fish, what is the problem? Inaccurate inventory. So the problem is that the results of our inventory are not okay. They're not accurate. And what do we have as main causes? We had different causes in the other one, but what do we have here as main causes?
Methods.
Methods, that means the method of taking inventory could be a cause, right? And what do you have here?
Machinery.
The machinery. So a method means things like doing it late, the entry is late, change notice not posted, inaccurate count, wrong location, procedures. Exactly. It is the way we do something. And here it's the machinery that we're using to do the inventory.
The IT software.
Yeah, the other one we have the IT. Right here it says the sorter is broken, the computer, the tape runs twice, the files are not updated, the barcode scanner, the sensor is dirty, the lens is cracked. So these are all symptoms of the causes. What we have in big, bold, are the causes. What we have in small are the symptoms. So we have here also people. How could people be responsible for inaccurate inventory? What kind of reasons do we have here? Can you read some of them?
They don't have enough experience.
They don't have enough experience, or they're not trained properly, or they can have a physical problem. Maybe they don't see well when they're actually taking the inventory, or when they're writing what they're writing.
Or maybe there is no audit, or this will be.
I think the audit part would probably be maybe in measures, right? Okay, materials. The document, maybe the document is illegible, or it's a duplicate, so you can't read it very well. Or the bins where you put the information are blocked. So you understand what they're doing? They're looking at all of, and you're trying to find the causes. How would you collect this data?
Interviews, questionnaires.
Interviews, questionnaires,
Searching on the net.
searching on the net, reports that are being sent to you. What happens if the data is not accurate? Am I going to find the right causes? What happens if the data that I have is not current, it's not updated, or it's not accurate?
Giving you weights, maybe. Weights.
No, I'm asking the question.
Gonna find the right cause.
Yeah, if I have the wrong data, it might make me think that the cause is this when it's not this at all. So you have to make sure that you verify the data. Has to be very, very, very important. Okay? Now, you can have different situations, but at the end of the day, you have to make sure that the data and the causes are correct. Just be careful with the cord so you don't fall down. Does that make sense to you? Now, have any of you ever done a cause and effect diagram before, or a fishbone diagram before?
No.
Engineers and people working in IT use them all the time. Why? Because they're very, very systematic in when they look for solutions and they look for problems.
Quality assurance to use it.
Quality assurance uses them on a regular basis. So, just to summarize, we put the name of the problem inside of the head of the fish. Along the backbone of the fish, you put in bold the causes, or what you think are the causes. Along these, you put in the symptoms or the effect. What do you see? That is not a difficult thing to do. What's difficult is making sure that you have the correct data. Now, let me give you another example. I'm going to ask you to do a fishbone diagram in a little while, okay? So I want to make sure that you really are understanding what it is. Here's another one. Here is misshipped products. So wrong products were shipped out. Now, look at, you see that you have certain standard kind of things that you need to be looking at. Number one, you have measures. In other words, what are the performance measures? Usually when you measure it, what are you looking for? You can have people. Maybe they were new hires. Maybe there was not enough training, or maybe onboarding was not done properly. When you look at a problem, you always have to look at people, and process. Always. There's a combination of people and process. The process is how something is done, and the people are who is doing it. Okay? So we have people, we have the environment. There was a power outage. That means that at the time when they were shipping out these products, the electricity went off for a while, so that could have caused problems. Methods, manual versus auto picking. Quality audits, those are the methods that are being used. Here, when we talk about the machines, the website updated the shipping software. So we're talking about how, this is not the problem. These are not the effects specifically. This is what you would be looking at if you were trying to find out why you misshipped products. Okay? It's the process. Materials, maybe the order forms. Maybe the order forms were not done properly. Maybe they were not filled in properly. So what it allows you to do, from an HR point of view, you can use a fishbone diagram for what?
Performance.
For performance. For training. For what? For turnover.
Recruitment.
For recruitment. For your recruiting. If you have a recruiting problem, you have a performance problem, you have a retention problem.
Job satisfaction.
You can even look at it from an interviewing point of view, right? If you interview the candidate, what could I put here?
Interview.
Yes, let's say that I'm using the fishbone diagram as a way of collecting information about the different candidates that I interview.
Skills, qualification.
Yes, so I could put skills, qualifications, let's say experience, etc. I could do it that way, and I put that information for each candidate on the same type of diagram. Much easier for me to compare afterwards, right?
Yes.
So, again, we're talking about these are the causes, and the effects would be the data that we have that we would put underneath it. Does that sort of make
Why
sense?
don't we use also the mind mapping?
Well, you can. You
Can we
can.
use it?
I think it's.
But mind mapping is another technique.
I understand, but instead of the fishbone, can we use also, for example, like interview, put it in the middle, and then find the problems, but in like the mind mapping way?
Well, you can mind map like you're using a fishbone. But keep in mind that the mind mapping does not have necessarily everything related in that way. You can design any kind of mind map. You know what I'm saying? The mind map by itself does not create the relationships. Whereas the fishbone diagram forces you to use a process. And that is that here's the problem, and that you have to put the causes down, and that you have to put the sub-causes. But you can design your mind map to do that. But itself, by alone, the mind map is not done that way.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Whereas this one, it's designed exactly for this purpose. To look at cause and effect. So, Henny, you're not in HR, but in the area where you are, have you ever used a fishbone diagram, or do you see that it could be used in any way?
Whenever I have a problem or a mistake happen, I make sure that to know what caused it in the first place so that it doesn't occur again.
Okay, so it would be the same thing, even though it's not HR. The idea, here's the mistake, or here's what we want to change, that we don't want to have happen again. We're going to look at all of the major factors, the causes that could contribute to the mistake, and we take the data that we have, and we organize the data under each of the causes. I just want to keep reminding you, if the data is incorrect, and your fishbone is beautiful, you still will not have the right information. So you have to do a correct fishbone diagram, but the data, you must make sure that the data that you have collected is the correct data. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, here's another example, and then you do one on your own. Here, the revenue budget is not balanced. So here's my problem, is that I'm supposed to have a balanced budget basically, but my revenue, the actual revenue, and the revenue that I was predicting I was going to have, it's not coming together. So here's my situation. Now you notice that the red parts are the main causes. In other words, why is it that my budget is not balanced in terms of revenue? Well, the staffing costs are 86% of the budget. So it's due to staffing costs. Other costs, the premises cost 8.5% of my budget. And I have data under here. Premises staff cost 3.5, 5-year maintenance plan undercosted. That's the effect that I have. In other words, I wasn't able to put the right cost for this plan.
Depreciation.
I undercosted, I under-evaluated the cost. Here, the staffing costs 86% of the budget. Professionals are 70% of the budget are made up of professionals, so we know professionals cost more. Low number of support staff. And if I look now at the facilities are underused, that's another reason why my revenue is not balancing. New training center opened locally. Premises not used for external events. So we're talking about this now. We could go and draw even more smaller things, and I could put in even all the data in there if I wanted to. Income heavily reliant on few big clients. Major client did not renew contract. Drop in clients. Do you understand what we're talking about now? If you wanted to make sure that your data was correct, you would have to put major client did not renew a contract, and you would put in maybe the name of the client and the amount of the contract. Yes, that would give you even more data or more information about this diagram, the information, so that you can actually start to solve the problem. Make sense in terms of what to do? Okay. Now, this is what I want you to do, and you can work on it because there aren't that many of us. We can either do it, I was thinking of having you do it in 2s, or you can do it in 3s. But what I want you to do is look at the traffic problem in Cairo, and we're going to do a diagram, a fishbone diagram, on that as a problem. So we're going to look at the root causes of the problem, and we're going to look at the effects or the symptoms of the problem. How do we know that those are root causes? All right, now that you've finished working on the fishbone diagram, can you give me an idea of what advantages it gave you? I mean, what were you able to do with it? How, and in which way would you be able to use it in the future?
We were exposed to different sections for the problem from different views.
Okay. What advantages did it give you as a group?
We categorize the root cause.
All right. So you were focused on categorizing root causes, right? You were looking for root causes. And then what else did you do?
But Mr. Hani, when he was sitting with us, he teaches us to define the problem first.
Important, isn't it?
Yes. So
Okay.
when we divided the problem, we tried to
So it's easier to define the causes.
the causes.
Okay. So you have to actually agree on a problem statement, or what we think the problem is, how we understand the problem, before you actually start to talk about causes, right? Do you think that this is going to be something that you could use? I mean, this process, is it something that would help you? What if you were, let's suppose that you had a problem with an employee. Let's say you have a motivation problem with the employee, or you have behavior problems with the employee. and you have to sit down and talk to the employee about this, would it help you to actually do this first?
Yeah.
Because what does it force you to do?
Analyze.
Forces you to analyze. What else does it force you to do?
Find
What
out the main problem.
Now you're focused on the causes
And find a solution.
and finding solutions. So we're looking
That's
at
what-
why.
yeah.
We're not looking so much at the behavior, but why is the person doing this?
The reason, the real reason.
Exactly. And if we don't know the real reasons, we can't even begin to solve the problem. So techniques are just like a tool that you have, right? That help you sort of understand things better and use it. Not as punishment or as a way of keeping you not free, but as a way for you to actually know that you're going to
open your
remain
mind.
focused. Exactly. And then you can be free to investigate all of the other kinds of things. Okay? All right. So we're going to work with the 5 whys. Okay, so we're going to look at the 5 whys technique, and that technique, you can use this technique for anything. You can use it if you're talking to your children and you want to have a real explanation about why they did what they did. Or you can use it to obtain data that we were talking about before. We were talking about in the fishbone, you have to make sure you have the right data. This is a way for you to collect data. So it's a very, very useful tool. Okay. Most of our tools, by the way, for productivity and for change came from Toyota, the company, Toyota. And they were known, unfortunately, in the last couple of years, they are not doing that well in terms of their brand. But in the past, they were known as innovators in terms of in terms of quality, in terms of productivity, increasing productivity, in terms of just in constant improvement. Kaizen, which is a concept about having quality at all levels, and excellence at all levels. So this came from Toyota. And if we look at it, we want to make sure that we're really talking about root cause. So how do I know it's a root cause and not an effect or not a symptom? We were talking about that before. So we're going to look at how do we use the 5 whys. 5 whys technique means I'm going to ask the question why 5 times in a row. And each time that I ask the question and I get an answer, I'm going to take the answer and make that answer become a question. So I build on what the person has told me. Okay? 5 levels down. So we'll see how we do this. So here's an example. The patient was late arriving in the operating room. It caused a delay. Why? Why was the patient late getting to the operating room? Obviously, this is not an HR example. There was a long wait for a trolley. So we say, why was there a long wait for the trolley? A replacement trolley had to be found. Why was a replacement trolley needed? Yes, so far? Now we're on the 3rd why. Okay? The answer is the original trolley's safety rail was worn and eventually broke down. Why did the replacement trolley break down? The answer is it had not been regularly checked for wear. In other words, the maintenance. It was not regularly checked for maintenance. Why? Now, my root cause is what?
We are not doing a regular maintenance.
Exactly. We have a problem with maintenance.
Preventive
Do
maintenance.
you understand what happens? We're looking at symptoms and we keep going down with the symptom until we get to the root cause. What happens if I stop here? I stop there was a long wait for a trolley.
I didn't have the real reason.
No, that means maybe there weren't enough trolleys. Maybe we should buy more trolleys. Is the problem that there weren't enough trolleys?
No.
No, the problem is that the trolleys that were there were not in working condition. Do you understand what we mean by 5 whys? 5 whys forces you to take a look at the source of the problem.
The main,
Where it actually comes from. Why? Because we have to solve the problem at the lowest level, not at the highest level. Our problem is not that the patient was late arriving in the operating room. Our problem is that the trolleys are not being maintained properly. As a result, it causes this, it causes this, it causes this, which causes the patient to be late to the operating room. Does that make sense to you? So, where did 5 Whys come from? Well, Toyota. It also came from, in other words, if you have a quality problem, you have defects in something, you're going to say, how come this was defective? How come? Until you trace it back. So, 5 Whys also is used by police. Have you ever watched those shows, the detective shows? They start saying, why, and when they ask for the first why, it's always a very general thing. And what are they doing? They're eventually, they don't say, they don't start off by saying, where were you, They start off by saying, hello, your name is, what, who do you know, until they get to the point of why were you there at 5 o'clock in this room. So they always start with a more general, exactly, it's a funnel. It's a funnel. You start off with a much more open thing so that you take the data and you keep going down until you find out the real cause. Okay? Can you use this with your children? For those of you who have children, how many of you have children? Can you use it for your children when they come up with an excuse for something? Why is your homework late? It's just late.
Yes.
Why is your homework late? The dog ate my homework. Why did the dog eat your homework?
I don't know what.
Okay, so I don't know where my homework is. Why don't you know where your homework is? So the idea is that you keep going down until finally there is no other answer. You get to there's no other answer, which means if there's no other answer, that's probably the root. It's probably the root cause.
Continue this.
Right? So let's say that I have an employee who comes to the office and the employee is late. And I say to her, why are you late? I was late leaving home. Why were you late leaving home? I can't just have the person say, I was late leaving home. You say, okay. That means you haven't gotten to the root cause. It means that she's probably going to be late again tomorrow. Unless today was a very special situation. Okay? So, this is what we're going to do. Here is the example of the budget. Do you remember when we did the fishbone diagram and we were talking about the revenue budget not balanced? So if I say, why is the revenue budget not balanced? And you say, well, because the costs are too high and the income is too low. Let's say that that's my answer, the answer that I get. I ask the question, why are the costs too high? Well, because the staffing costs are 86% of the budget. Why are staffing costs 86% of the budget? Well, because we have 70% of people are professionals and there's a low number of support staff. Why are 70% of the people professionals? Well, because staffing is very stable and there are a large number of management points. So the idea is that I'm getting the results, the data, like the fishbone, except the data is coming from my asking the 5 Whys. Example, let's say that I go down here now, income is too low. Why is the income too low? And the person says, well, because we had a drop in clients and the facilities are underutilized. Why do we have it? Because when you have 2 answers in a why, you have to take each one and break it down. Right? If it's only 1 answer, then you break out the 1 answer into 2. Or at least, it could be more than 2, but at least 2. So here, we say, why was there a drop in clients? Well, because a major contract was not renewed. And we didn't create any new services or products. Why was the contract not renewed? Well, because the client now does their own training and our pricing was not competitive. Now I can continue. I can say, why is the client doing his own training now? Well, they increased their HR department, now they have a training department. Do you understand what I'm saying? I can keep going, how come our pricing was not competitive? Well, when we did the pricing, we were the only ones providing the service. We didn't have to be competitive. Do you understand what this does? What it does actually is this is the 5 whys, but I'm using the answers that I get to do this diagram. It is a diagram of the 5 whys, so you don't have to do a diagram for the 5 whys. You can just put down the information if you like. So, fishbone is one way to do it, and the 5 whys is another way to do it, and you can take the information from this and put it into the fishbone.
This one is very nice.
Yeah?
I like it. It drives you, it takes you to the root
Yes.
cause of the
And
problem.
it can take you until
Step by
you
step,
have
yeah.
nothing left. It's done at the end. Now, I want you to ask 5 whys. I want you to practice doing that. This is going to be our situation. I was basing it on 2 and 2 and 2, and I think probably that would be, or you could do it 3 and 3 and then go ahead and take turns. But I want someone to be an HR manager, and I want somebody to be a recruiting specialist. Okay, you can decide on who's going to be whom. This is what I want you to do. Here's the case. The employee has just turned in the quarterly recruitment report to the HR manager. Quarterly recruitment report. It is now 10:30 a.m. It is a critical report since the company is having a serious problem with turnover. It was due by 9 a.m. It is now 10:30. It was due by 9 so that the HR manager would have enough time to review it and to prepare support data for the meeting with the CEO, which is scheduled for 11 o'clock. You are now the HR manager. One of you is going to be an HR manager, and the other is going to be an HR specialist. And you're going to use the 5 whys to find out why the report is late. Yes, do you understand?
One of us gonna be the HR manager.
You're going to do a role play. One of you is going to be the manager, and the other one is going to be the employee. The manager is going to be asking the 5 whys, because you want to find out why the report has been turned into you at 10:30 when you asked for it to be done by 9.
Alright.
You understand what I'm saying? So now, you have to make sure that you are getting the person to give you the data that you need to go down each level. Okay? Does that sound like something you can do?
Now the job.
Yes, of course you can. Okay, so now after having had that experience, a couple of things that I want to mention to you. First of all, be aware of the fact that sometimes the data that you're going to receive might be the wrong data. Sometimes it's the wrong data because the person doesn't know the answer. Sometimes it's the wrong data because they're giving you on purpose wrong information. So we have to be very careful that you don't take the data that comes from this and automatically think that it's the correct data. You have to check the data. And you know, sometimes employees want to give you information, they think it's the right information, but it actually might not be information that is correct. So, a couple of things. First of all, you can do the 5 whys with other people. Let's say that you have a problem inside of a department. You can do a 5 whys with one person and then do it with another, and do it with another, and do it with another, and you might see that there are similar kinds of
Somebody is liar.
Exactly, or somebody might not be, or maybe they don't know. They could be lying, they could be that they don't know, they could be, exactly. So, we need, because otherwise you might be solving the wrong problem. 1. 2, 5 is not a magic number. That means that maybe 4 is enough. Maybe 6, you need to go to 6, because maybe you have to go down even one more level. The reason we use 5 is because 5 is a standard. And usually, if it's applied carefully, by the 5th one, you have basically found the root cause, right, through experience. But I don't want you to think of any of these tools as being perfect, meaning if I use it, I will get exactly the results I want. No, they are tools and you're using them with human beings. So that means that we should never assume that the information that we have is absolutely correct. Okay? Did anybody have any particular problems using it? Keep in mind that when somebody, let's say that somebody gives you an answer, I was waiting for data from my colleague, that's why I was now. The person has no authority over the colleague. If the colleague turned in data late, if you're a manager and you're trying to help the employee with that problem, you will probably have to deal with the employee or the manager of the employee. Because sometimes we get to a point where the root cause is outside of the control of the employee. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if that's the case, we have to look at it. If that's really the root cause, you have to find another way of dealing with it. Because it could be that the employee or the person giving you the information reaches a point they might not even know the answer. So you don't want to keep going down 5 if at level 2 already it's clear to you that they don't have the information. Does that make sense? So it's a question of practice. You can practice it, using it on people. The more you practice, the more skillful you will become. And you don't ever want to sound like you're a detective. You know, that you're trying to find the truth. Because when you say to somebody, why? Why did you do that? Why? Their reaction is going to be very negative. It is not that kind of why. You would say, well, why did you do it like this? Or why didn't you do this? Or what made you decide to? Why did you choose this? Right? So keep in mind that the tone of voice and the way that you speak to the person can either make that person give you the information, or it might make the person not want to give you information.
Can we improve the one we investigate about a certain problem in a solution?
Definitely. I would say that's an excellent way of doing it, because most of the time problems are caused by more than one factor. Very rarely are problems caused by one factor. So if I want to have a solution, I need to have whoever is affected by that problem, if they can be part of the solution, definitely. You have a much better result. We're going to deal with the third one, which is the last one for today. And it's called force field analysis. And it is for us, it's a tool that we can use that will allow us to look at when you're trying to push through a change. What kind of resistance can you expect? And what kind of forces do you have that are in your favor? We're going to look at those two things, and then we're going to try to see if we can balance them so that we have a better chance of succeeding in bringing about the change that we were talking about before. So, this is just a review of what we already talked about earlier on today, which is that the process has 3 phases in it. The first one is unfreezing. That means we have to melt away the resistance. To unfreeze, it's to make people stop being stuck in the mindset of the past and what it was like, because we're talking about future change. The change is actually moving from that. If they're unstuck, then we move them eventually away from the past towards the future. And of course, refreezing is when you take the success, hopefully it will be successful, and you make it into a routine so that you can use it very easily. We will not be talking about that last phase. We're talking now actually more about the unfreezing part, which is how do we get people to go along with change initiatives so that we can succeed in those changes. So we use the force field analysis to assess how viable a project is. Viable means, is it doable? Is it going to work? And how desirable is that project? What we're trying to do is actually analyze how feasible it is. Is it actually going to work? And 2, do we really want it? Is this something that we really want? Or just an idea that we had one day that sounded fantastic, and then when you really examine it, you find that maybe that's not what you want. And we also want to focus our attention on reducing resisting forces and increasing supporting forces. So, resisting forces are going to be everything that is going to get or can get in the way of you becoming successful in creating that change. Supporting forces are forces that can actually help you succeed in bringing about the change. So we want to have, ideally, you want to have very high supporting forces or driving forces and very low resisting forces, but that is not the reality. That's the dream. In reality, we have to find out how strong are those forces. So when we look at forces for change, those are driving, they're going to drive us towards change, and forces resisting change that are going to actually stop the change from happening. Output, meaning once we finish the force field analysis, what do we actually get? Well, we're going to get an analysis and understanding of the forces that are stronger. Which are stronger, the driving or the resisting? And then we will form an action plan. Based on the results, we will be able to know what kind of things we're going to do, and we're going to actually do it today. We're going to look at a situation, we're going to evaluate the forces, we're going to learn how to do the diagram, and then we're going to look at what do we do to make that change more successful. The chances, to increase our chances of actually succeeding with it. Okay, so this is another way of looking at it. Meaning, you see, status quo is the actual state, right? We talked about that before. Status quo means what we have now. This is what we have now. But actually, we want a desired state. Future is what we would like for it to be. When we did the example of the traffic problem in Cairo, the idea is in Cairo right now, here is the extent of the traffic problem. What we would like to have in 5 years from now, Cairo would look like this when it comes to traffic, right? So, what do we need to understand? We need to understand there's a balance that happens in any situation. Resisting forces are forces that keep things the way they are, meaning we don't want to change. Driving forces are counter forces that actually look at making the change happen. And of course you know that if you look at anything politically, you're always going to have forces that resist because it's in their interest to keep things the way it is, and forces that are there to change a situation because they want a desired state. Does that make sense to everybody? So what we want to do is we want to measure this and measure that and see what the difference is, and then see what we need to do. So let's look at an example. Let's say that we want to move, we're working for a company, and the company wants to move its main office from Heliopolis to Tagama, New Cairo. That is the change that we're looking at. So we look at, here is the balance where the two sides meet. We have driving forces, these are for change. Restraining forces or resisting forces, it means the same thing. These are forces against the change. So you have negative impact, positive impact. Okay? So example here. Well, can you give me some ideas? Can somebody read what some of the supporting or driving forces are?
Actual headquarters is very crowded.
Okay, the actual headquarters is very crowded. That means people would like to move because it's crowded. Anybody else? What about the second one?
Impossible.
Parking is impossible.
A common headquarters in the EU support.
Okay, so the company headquarters, which is in the EU, supports the move. Kenny? Can't read it? Custom designed facilities. That means if we move it to New Cairo, the facilities will be designed for our company.
Opportunities for growth.
Opportunities for growth, because you're going to have the ability to have a bigger place, and senior managers support the move. So these are all forces that are in favor of the move, right? Now let's look at the forces against the move. Can somebody give me, go ahead.
many employees live in Heliopolis or what is it?
Many employees live in Heliopolis, not in Nasser City. Maybe they don't want to move to Tegama. What else?
Higher estate costs.
Much more expensive, the land in Tegama than it is right now in Heliopolis or the other places. What do you have?
Disruption of
Disruption
of routine.
Resumption of routine. That means that people are going to be
Out of the comfort
out
zone.
of the comfort zone because they're used to certain things. What else?
Extra transportation costs.
Buses. So that means the company will have to provide buses for the employees. That's going to be extra costs. What else?
Might lose some employees.
We might lose some employees who will refuse to go to Tegama. And then the other one?
Strong culture of resistance to change.
So maybe inside of the company, this is a company where people hate change. So you understand that what we're looking at now, this is a force field analysis, except that we don't know how strong these things are or how weak they are, right? All we've done so far is we've just listed the forces, what we call pro, for, and con, against. But that's not enough for us. Good. Okay, so I'm going to, just because she came all the way back for this, I'm going to go back and make sure that you've understood. Okay? Thank you. So what we were saying is that force field analysis allows us to deal with the unfreezing part. Because unfreezing means that we have to get people to unstick themselves from the past, the way they were doing things, right? So the force field analysis is going to allow us to understand how connected, what's the word I'm looking for? How tightened or how bonded they are to that past. Because for us to move them, we want to change what they're
How to
doing.
break this bond.
Exactly. How to break that bond. Okay, so if we need to do that, then we also need to find out, force field analysis allows us to find out how viable or what's the other word we can use for viable? In other words, can this project succeed?
Feasible?
Yeah? Feasibility would be a good way of doing it. Is this project feasible? And secondly, is it really what we need? Because once you start scratching the surface and you start really looking at things, you're going to say to yourself, maybe that's not such a good idea. Maybe we should look at something else. It forces you to really analyze all of the forces for and against an idea. Okay, then it focuses our attention on reducing the negative forces and increasing the positive forces. This is what this is about. Because when we increase the positives and we decrease the negatives, we have a much better chance that we'll succeed. And then at the end, when we finish with the force field analysis, we will have, the output will be that we will have a diagram and an understanding of the strength of those forces, and then we will be able to actually come up with a plan on how to balance the forces. You need to try to balance those forces if you want to have a chance to succeed. So this is a diagram of what I've just said, basically, which is that these are the driving forces. These are for change, yes? These are against change. This is where the actual is right now. Here's our balance. We have to shift the balance upward because we're trying to go here. The desired state is at the top. So that means that we have to make the driving forces stronger so that they can move those resisting forces higher. And so that is really the use of the instrument. So we had an example here of a company moving from Heliopolis to Tegama, and all of the supporting forces, the forces that are for the move, like the headquarters is very crowded, parking is impossible, the company headquarters in the EU supports it, custom designed facilities, opportunities for growth, and senior managers support the move. All of these are driving forces. The resisting forces are that many employees live in Heliopolis and Nasser City. They might not want to move. High real estate costs, disruption of routine, extra transportation costs, the company's going to have to buy buses to get people to work. They might lose some employees. And strong culture of resistance to change, the company is not very accepting of change. Now what we have to do is we have to find out how strong or how weak these forces are. For us to list the forces is not enough. Now you have to talk about the balancing. Okay? So, here's what we do if we want to balance the forces. We write a clear statement of the problem or the issue. In this case, the issue is, should the company move their headquarters from Heliopolis to Tagama? That is basically the problem statement, or the decision that needs to be made. We state the goal or the outcome sought. What would we want to have happen? What are we looking for? What would it look like? It would look like we would move the company to a bigger space where there will be opportunities for growth, where it's closer to clients, customers, where basically the environment is green and it's attractive and allows for us to. What more facilities where there's parking, etc. All of these things. This is what we would want the desired state to be, right? List the driving forces which lead towards desired income. Outcomes. Not income. Income is money. So just the outcomes. What do we want? Which forces are going to drive us? Then we're going to list the impeding forces or the resisting forces. And then here is the thing we haven't talked about up to now. We will score the forces 1 through 4, 1 through 5, or 1 through 10, as you like, with 1 being least important or least strong, and 10, the highest number, being the strongest.
Should I score the forces according to the work over these impeding forces? I mean, if I find a solution for one of the impeding forces, so this score would be 1 because I already find a solution.
Yeah, we're going to do that in a minute. Okay, we're going to look at that. But the idea is this. The idea is to make you think about when I scored based on what? I have to decide on criteria. We're not going to do all of that today because it's usually a whole training thing on using force field analysis. But I want to give you a summary of how it works. Okay? Because you would have to decide, if I give a a score of 4 out of 5, what does 4 out of 5 mean? What have I scored it on? You understand? It just can't be your opinion. It has to be that you have criteria that you have used. All right? And then we total the columns. So I'll show you how that's done, and then you will do one on your own. Actually, we'll do it together. Here's an example of sort of what it would look like. Let's say we had, in this example, the 4 is the highest. Okay, the highest score is a 4. Which would mean equilibrium is the balance. That is our actual situation. Present productivity is here. This line is our balance of where the actual situation is now, today. Then what we have is driving forces, an estimate of the forces. Here are the forces. And I haven't given you the names of the forces, it doesn't matter. I just want you to see the diagram right now. So we would take each of the driving forces, we would give them a name, and we would calculate how strong they are. So this one is basically almost
The strongest.
It's the strongest of the 4, right? And the weakest one is this one here. And again, these are driving forces. These are positives. The negative ones, the restraining forces, we have this one, which is the highest. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to create a diagram that looks like this. What I'm going to do afterwards is send you an actual, how would you call it? It's just sort of a table that you can use with an example that I've done, all right? So don't worry about that aspect of it, because I will send that to you as a Word document, as sort of a document that you can actually use. Not as a PDF, but as a workable document, okay? So far, are you okay? Do you understand where we're going and why we're doing this? Now, here's an example. The example is that we want to upgrade a factory with manufacturing equipment. So let's say that you are an HR person, you are working in a factory, and the factory, in order to be upgraded, we need new manufacturing equipment. Maybe the equipment has been there for a long time. It doesn't allow you to compete effectively in the market anymore. So here is our change. This is what we're looking for. Do we do this? Well, we would like to do it. Are we going to be successful in doing it? So what do we do now? We're going to look at these forces, which are the forces for change, and we have the forces that are going to be against change. And we have one, this is out of 10. This is going to be 10 in total, but these are the actual, the strengths. The strengths, and when I add them all up, it's 10. So, example. Clients want new products. That's a driving force. I want to buy new manufacturing equipment, and I know that my clients have been asking me for new products. So that is a supporting force. Everybody agrees?
Yes.
Okay. The machinery will improve speed and production. You all agree?
Yes.
Yes? Raises the volume of outputs, which means I can produce more products with the machinery, with the new machinery that I'm able to produce right now. So that would be also a plus. Because when we produce volume, we could also cut costs, right? So I become more competitive. Control the rising maintenance costs.
Of course.
That means my machinery is old, which means I have to maintain it on a regular basis. It probably costs me a lot of money to replace, to do, etc. So now, what happens is that the force of this is a 4. That means that I calculated, it is a 4. This, how important is this force? How strong is the force? This is a 4. This, improving speed and production, is a 2. Raising volume inputs for me is a 3. And 1, controlling rising maintenance. So which is the strongest force?
New clients want to do new products.
Here, the client wants new products. When I add up all of the driving forces, the strength of the driving forces is 10. Yes? So far?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's look at the strength of the opposing forces. The first one is, can somebody read that?
Loss of staff over time.
Loss of staff overtime. Because the machines don't run very well, my people are used to getting paid overtime. You think they're going to be happy at losing their overtime? No, definitely not. So that's going to be a resisting force, because why should we get new equipment and then they're going to not use us? I'm going to lose money. As an employee, I'm going to be paid less. That would be a resisting force. What about the second one? Staff afraid of new technology. Very often that happens, right? Your employees, when they have new technology, they think, maybe they'll get rid of me, I won't know how to do it, I might fail at doing it, they're worried. What about environmental impact of new technology?
But it should be new technology would be more good for the environment.
It could be, but maybe this particular technology that they have, because he lists it as a 1, which means that it's not very strong, but still it's not great.
Okay.
And the cost is a 3, which means that's quite important. We have a couple of 3s. We have cost is a 3, staff afraid of new technology is a 3, and loss of staff overtime is also a 3. And then we get to disruption, which is a 1. Disruption, you know, the idea of all of the things of moving the equipment in, and maybe all of the office, maybe people have to move around and they have to redesign things.
It's a headache.
On what base I put this number?
Huh?
On what base I put this number?
You would put them on the basis of how strong are those forces.
From my point of view.
Yes, but from your point of view, you have to use some criteria. In other words, you would decide at this point on how you would evaluate the strengths. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
That you would have a way of calculating this. In other words, here, controlling rising maintenance costs is a 1, which means that, okay, I would like for that to happen, But it's not the most important thing for me. My most important thing here is that the clients want new products. So you're looking at how relative to it, meaning how important is it related to the other ones. Okay? So we're not going to get into how, because that how is a big issue. But all I want you to know that there has to be a how. You have to have a logical way of evaluating. So let's suppose now when we add all of this up, the total is 11. 11 points in terms of opposing forces and 10 points in terms of driving forces. Is that a good balance?
No.
What are the chances that this is going to succeed? Are the chances good?
No.
It's not good. No, it's possible that you might succeed, but probably you would not succeed. Or you would succeed and you would have a lot of problems. So what do we want to do? What we would like to do is we would like to have this higher than that.
Minimize the risk and
Correct?
maximize the strength.
So what I want you to do now, this is the assignment for you. I want you to find ways of either reducing the strength of the forces opposing the project or of increasing the forces that support the project. I want you to do that in small little groups, either in 2s or 3s. In other words, try to find out how discuss it and find out how you would go ahead and then either you would want to reduce the resisting forces and you would want to increase the driving forces or the supporting forces. I want you to think of some ways that you can actually do that.
This, one of the previous slide.
Yes, I'm going to bring it back to you because that's what you're going to have to work with. Just tell me basically one thing that you would change. Let's work on the driving forces or the forces for change. How could you increase these so that we have higher numbers, or you can add if you like. So what did you have?
Actually, it's different, but I think we can use the sustainability of the brand. Our brand needs us to upgrade the manufacturing sustainability of our brand.
Sustainability of your brand.
In the future.
Right. But how would you put that in there?
Market analysis.
So doing a market analysis.
Yes.
Okay. I think I understand what you're trying to do. Let's see if anybody else is thinking like that. What do you have in terms of positives? In some way that you can actually increase the driving forces. Do you have?
Actually, we change the forces against change to strengths.
Okay, like, can you give me one example of that?
Okay, for lots of stuff over time,
Yes.
we had it as a profit share, and instead of employee having their salary and overtime monthly, we will promise them that after 6 months and after the production, it will be a profit share that will be in their account, and they're having a lump sum. So this will be
Okay.
a strength instead of weakness.
Okay. Or actually, maybe it's not that, but what you're doing is you're changing the
The
weakness,
mindset
or you're subtracting the weakness.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
So let me ask you this question now. In your case, what would this become? What number would you end up with here?
With 3, it will be 3 in the positive.
Okay, no, I don't want you to do that. I want you to decrease here.
-1.
Okay.
Zero.
Okay, it could be that maybe it's a 0, it depends on, or it could
Or
be,
1.
or 1,
1.
or it could be right. The idea is this, it depends on how much of it you're doing, right? So example, let's say that I'm going to give profit share, and let's say that the profit share that I would give is actually more
Than the
than the
value of
overtime
overtime.
that they would lose.
Yes.
In which case, it would actually give you a minus here.
But it will
gives us,
give,
And it could actually increase
it
this.
will give satisfaction, increase satisfaction on the other
Okay,
side.
so you would create another
Yeah.
arrow that would talk about employee satisfaction.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
increase the number, yeah? I increase the number in this case. I minimize the other number.
You
I
would
put four,
minimize
for example.
this, and if it adds to this, you could put in an addition here, something that's not all here already, if you're adding something. Okay, and I think that what you were trying to say when you were talking about sustainability of brand is the idea of making a business case for the change, right? In other words, meaning that if you explain to employees why the change actually has to happen and why it's needed from a business point of view, that actually that might be a driving force. In other words, it might actually make people understand that the change is a change that really isn't required for them.
Other place, the factory will close.
Exactly.
And we will all move.
Exactly. So you would all be at home.
But
You
again,
would
they
have a
an
job.
advantage to compete in the market.
Exactly. Anything else that we want to put here in terms of positives?
Yes, we add the decreasing employee with the new technology, so it's increase the revenue.
Increasing say that again, I didn't catch
By
that.
decreasing the number of employee in the company with the new technology.
but that's
Using
the
the new
idea.
But that's
technology.
not a positive thing, decreasing the number of employees.
Why?
ما احنا كده
Because
هنبقى
people
نظام
would,
شاطرين.
would lose their
Have
jobs.
upgrades, you would
That's
have
not
people.
that's not necessarily going to be a
Gonna-
positive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, put yourself in the position of employees. If you're going to lose your job because of this change, I can't consider it a positive, a driving force. I mean, it can be a driving force, but not for what you're talking about, not for employees feeling that they're losing their jobs. Maybe for you it would be a question of cost. You would have a reduction of cost here. But the reduction of cost would end up here being a negative. Right? Because reduction of costs here, if I means firing employees, then that's definitely going to be a negative from the point of view of the resisting forces. Why would I accept a change that would make me lose my job?
So I think the
100%.
best thing to increase the positive forces is to, as they did, is to make it
To make the
to make the negative forces try to do it as a positive force.
Yes, to make the negative forces become positive, but that's not possible all the time. So even if we decrease, if we're not capable of doing that, and we're decreasing some things even by 1, it's going to definitely help you. Right? So the idea is, how do we do, or what do we do to make things better? Is there anything else that you want to add? Yes?
These injuries and more safe working environment due to new technology and new manufacturing
And that would be in what?
force for change.
Oh, in forces for change, it would be fewer accidents, you mean, and fewer injuries. So let's say that is right now a problem. If that's a problem, then here, definitely you would say greater quality, safety, fewer accidents, etc. Would be.
New technology itself can increase the revenue. So it's the point, yeah?
Yes, I
When
think
we
that they
change the
have.
software of the company,
Well,
new program.
I think that both of these have got to do with revenue, increasing revenue. You know what I'm saying? Because they have raised volume outputs, that's the new equipment. Improved speed in production, that's the new equipment. So already those are broken down, so I can't add that again because it's already there. Okay? So now, let me show you the way of doing it. Now that you've already done it yourself, let me show you what it would look like if we had come up with some ideas on how to increase and decrease. Okay, so this is the original thing that we actually were working with, the way that it was. And I'm going to, here are what we're trying to do. Right now we have a balance of 11 to 10. 11 against and 10 for. We want to try to get a balance that's different, where we would have actually 7 against and 12 for. But because 7 to 12 gives you a really nice balance in favor of driving forces. So I'm going to show you how we would actually do that. Let's say that here, you already have this idea, some of you, the loss of staff overtime, we raise the wages. So let's say that profit share or you raise the salaries. I'm going to reduce by 2. It was a 3. So I reduce it. You see, I haven't eliminated it, but I have reduced it by 2, which means now the strength of that is a 1. Because when I talk to employees, I'm going to say, yes, you will lose overtime. However, what you will gain in terms of money is this. Okay? Staff afraid of new technology. I will do training. I will reduce the fear by 2. That was also a 3. That means if the staff is afraid of new technology, and I do training in terms of new technology, then I'm going to, the cost probably the cost of training, I would have to take that out, so it can't become a zero, because the cost itself will increase, right? But I can reduce the strength of the opposing force from a 3 to a 1. Environmental impact of new technology, we had a 1. And somebody said, yes, but new technology is environmentally more friendly. Yes, but in this case, it's not a very strong opposing force. So what do? I look for another type of technology that gives me the same kind of results that is more environmentally friendly. You understand? Instead of choosing this machinery, I'm going to look for other machinery that is close to this but doesn't have the same thing. In which case, I can actually reduce it from a 1 to a 0. Cost. Provide employee training, increase the cost by 1. This was a 4. Remember here, I decrease it by a 2, but the cost increases. So that means that sometimes I decrease it in one place and I end up increasing it in another. But that's okay, because actually what we're trying to do is create a balance. We're not trying to eliminate all of the resisting forces. You're not going to be able to do that. Disruption is a 1, we leave it at that. So now what we have this has increased by 1, this has decreased by 1, this has decreased by 2, and this has decreased by 2. So you have here 8 as a total, right? 1, 2, 5, 6, 8. Now we go to this side. New, build business case for change among employees. That's what you were talking about. In other words, show them why this new machinery is important for the future of the company and for their future in terms of their jobs. So if I'm able to do that and I have the data and I communicate with them and I make a presentation and I allow them to ask questions so that they are really understanding, I can actually end up with this being a positive. Clients want new products, I leave that the way that it is. I can't really do much for it. This stays basically the same, this stays basically the same, but work variety and diversity means that if we have new machinery, what that would mean that maybe some people would actually have new opportunities as well. In terms of the type of work, maybe I could train them to do higher level work, so that gives certain opportunities that would become a positive. All right, so what happens here now? When I look at it, I end up with 14 points, and I end up here with 8. What's the difference then? Now, if I'm looking at this project, if I'm looking at the project, what happens?
Now I have 60%.
It's more successful.
It's more likely to succeed than the way I had it before, which was that it's more likely not to succeed. And what do I need to do here? In terms of action plan, what do I need to do? I need to develop a case, a business case that I need to present, right? I need also to find out what kind of jobs are going to be available. So I need to do my homework. In other words, if I find out what diversity and what jobs are available, then I will be able to explain those to my employees when I meet with them. Correct? All right, what about here? What would I need to do?
Train people differently.
So that means I have to come up with a training program. It means I have to calculate
Financial proposal.
a financial proposal for that plan. Okay, what else do I need to do?
Search for
Calculate the wages.
search for another machines,
Okay, so we go to the machine. That means
or maybe search for a good terms for leasing contracts instead of buying it as lump sum one at a time.
you mean like lease to buy kind of thing,
Yes.
special considerations? Yes.
They make a new salary structure.
Make a new salary structure, or make the profit share that you're talking about.
Incentives plan.
So plan it out. How much would it cost? Who would be affected by it? How would the calculations be made, etc. So this is something that could actually be presented to employees so that they would understand. Okay, is there anything else that we have to do? So we're talking about the training, the cost of the training, the type of training, calculation of the salary structure or of the profit share, So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 different things that need to be taken care of and worked on. And here you have basically 2 things, 2 new things that need to be worked on. But actually all of these things you would calculate, right? When I talk about raised volume outputs, I still would have to have an understanding, what does that mean? I'm raising my volume by how much? So I can predict my revenue to be how much? I'm putting arrows in there and I'm putting numbers, but I said before that the criteria for how I give those numbers, I have to develop that criteria. It can't just be that I sit and say, clients want new products. That's worth 4 for me. What the 4 means what? 4 in relationship to 1 work variety. What does it mean? So as long as I know this, I understand, I can explain. I know exactly how I did the calculations. All right, so what does this do for you? What does this process do for you?
Better planning.
Planning, better planning.
Help us for the changing.
Definitely helps you with change. You understand that change cannot be something that you just impose on people? That you can't just decide one day to have a change in something and go ahead and pretend like everything is going to go well? Now, why don't people do this?
Afraid.
Decision making.
Afraid. They're afraid.
Afraid.
Making in this country is usually enforced.
High cost.
Okay.
Not from bottom to top. It is from top to bottom.
Well, even if it's from top to bottom, but it
It's
needs
made
to
by
be done.
authority, not made by the best interest of the community or the organization.
So if I'm a senior manager in a company, what should this have been done before they decide on any kind of major change?
Yes.
Yes, all of the
Should be,
calculations should have been done, right? You wanted to say something?
I think that we're facing the same in taking the new license for the mobile for Telecom Egypt. But the problem is that the senior management don't want to face the employees or don't want to involve them.
Yes.
So they are
Yes.
in a direction and the senior management are in another direction doing what they are.
I think that people think that by not involving or by not sharing information with people, that the change will actually go better. Do you think that that's true? Actually, they have an opportunity to reduce
They don't understand.
the resistant forces. People are not stupid. They know. They understand.
I think if they created a business case of the real need for us to enter another market, and that's going to be good in the future, we will get a commitment and involvement of the employees. But they are doing
And I think I've mentioned this before. If I haven't, then let me mention it now. There's a proverb or a statement that says nobody washes a rented car. Nobody washes a rented car, which means that you must feel ownership for something if you're going to protect it. Right?
Sometimes the manager has no good vision.
Yes, well, or the vision, or maybe the vision is there, but it is not very well defined. They haven't done the planning, the strategic thinking and planning that is required. Right?
maybe they don't have the vision.
Or maybe
But
they don't
are
have.
implementing it. They
Yeah.
are really doing things.
They
that
might-
merges and-
Right, they might say, we want to increase the revenue by 20% in the next 2 years. That's a vision. But how do you do that? We want to do this, yes, but how do you do that? Do you just sit and you let the change come in? We talked about managing change. The change is a process. How do we manage? We manage by using the principles that we talked about before, the 10 principles of how to manage change effectively, plus we use tools that allow us to get the data that we need so that we can do what we need to do in terms of taking action to help that change become successful. Right? So what do you have here? You have an incredibly effective tool if it's used properly. Now, let me ask you something. How could you use it inside of your department? We've been talking about change at the level of the company, but how could you use it inside of your department?
new yearly objectives of the department. If there are another objectives that are a little bit hard or difficult, I try to eliminate the resistance. If you're going to maybe make another.
So you're talking about a challenging objective.
Yes.
An objective that challenges you. That means that you probably will run into obstacles, right?
And I'm trying to gain the commitment of my staff that it's going to be good in the future.
So when would you do a force field analysis?
When implementing a new procedure.
Yes? Or even when thinking, before you decide to implement a new procedure, you need to decide, is this project worth it, or should I do another project instead? What are the chances that I will succeed? We said before that 70% of change initiatives fail. Why? Because they don't do this. They just decide, they make a decision, they decide they're going to do it, and they start doing it. And they haven't really calculated what could stop them from succeeding and what is going to help them succeed. And let's look at increasing our chances of success and decreasing our chances of failure. So, of the three things, the three tools that we learned how to use today, are there some that you feel are going to be more useful for you or more easy for you to use? Or are they basically at the same level? All three of them, you feel that you would be comfortable using them?
Fishbone is a little bit analysis tool. This is more of the future. I change from and stick to another step by changing the number or working with it. The fishbone is more like an analysis, and then I use the problem and solve it in another way.
Yes. So the fishbone actually, I could develop these things from the fishbone, right? I have some factors, things that will cause certain things to go well, things that will cause others not to go so well. So all three tools are actually, they are there for you to integrate and to use at different parts of the change management process. Every time I run into a problem and I need to understand that problem, I can definitely use the fishbone diagram. Yeah? I decide what really is the problem, what is causing this problem, what are the symptoms of the problem. So I understand it, it's clear in people's mind what it is. Then we want to check all the causes. And then we use the 5 whys to make sure that the data that we have is correct and we have identified the causes properly. Once we have identified the causes properly, we can develop some positive forces that would allow us to be more successful. Right? Because causes can be for or against. That means that I can have something that causes certain things, some good things to happen, or I can have causes that force negative things to happen. If they are negative, they are opposing your idea or your project. If they are positive, they are driving forces. So then I look at those forces and I evaluate them, and I do what we did just before, which is to look at the numbers and see what can we decrease, what can we increase. So that your chances then, I'm not saying that's all of change management, but that is a big part of change management, that you start to see it as something that you have to understand and that there's a process that you need to work with. It's not something you pick up here and another piece here and then we put the pieces together and you think that it's going to work. Now, I don't know in your particular positions how or what you can do with this, but I'm hoping that it can help you think in a different way, that your mindset is different as a result.
In life also.
In life, yes.
In life and then work and job.
We need it.
Even if you're talking about a problem with a relationship, you might say, I have a problem with my mother, I have a problem with my father, I have a problem with whoever it is. The problem statement is here, right? We still can look at the causes and the effects. Or you can actually sit down with the person and ask the questions of why. Example, why do you do this? You know, it drives me crazy. Why are you always late when you have to... So you can use, it's exactly the same concept. It's the same concept. The three things, the three tools work very well together to give you a much better chance of actually solving either a problem or making a decision, or looking at trying to maximize our chances of success in terms of the change management process. So do you have any questions for me? Because it must be absolutely clear now. You will have crystal clear, everything is going to work. It really is crystal clear?
Yes.
What do you need to do then?
Implement.
We talked about that during the break, that skill building is about practice. What you have at this point are the tools. What you need to develop is the skill of working with the tools. You don't need anything more than this, basically. If you build the skill and you use it, then basically you're going to become just much better at it. If you're working in a team situation, do you think it would be a good idea to actually help your team learn how to use
Yes,
these?
very much. Yes, if they are cooperating.
Yes. If there's something in it for them, if you can make them understand that they will actually benefit, then they will want to know how to use it. And if you have an opportunity to share it with them and say, you know what, I learned something the other day. Of course, your attitude has got to be very positive, and it can't be, you know, I learned something the other day. It has to be more, look, I'm so excited, I learned something the other day, and I think it's really going to make things so much better for us. Let's try it, let me show you. So it's done, you know, collaboratively, like as a colleague, respecting the other person and just wanting to share. Yeah. So that is what I hope that you will do with what we've done today. Any questions? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right.